now time to do something a little bit different from what we usually do, which is Michigan football. We're going to talk about our playoff teams for the year. Our top 4 teams. We're going to make our predictions on who that'll be. Matt, let's start with you this time. Who are your 4 teams and why?
Yeah, start off with reigning champs, team that's always seems like they're always in there. Yeah, I've got Alabama. Their schedule is ridiculous. According to SP Plus, they're facing 2 preseason top 10 opponents, and they also face Florida, who's just outside the top 10. But it's still Alabama. So I have Alabama until proven
Real
otherwise.
Quick, is Miami top 10?
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
They've got Miami and A&M in the top 10, and then Florida is just outside.
They don't play Georgia.
And they don't play Georgia. That's right.
Yeah.
But I mean, their schedule, it's, Miami neutral site, at Florida, at A&M, at Auburn versus LSU. I mean, they do have a difficult schedule.
I don't think Florida will be as difficult as it may seem. I think the quarterback position is kind of in flux, but
yeah, and I don't think
Gainesville.
I don't think it's any one of those teams necessarily individually.
Because it's Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. Like Alabama, the year they played USC, who was ranked in the top grouping, and they just beat the brakes off of them. So, it's Alabama. So I think despite that, it's just that grouping of 5 teams, my 4 playoff teams, they definitely have the toughest schedule of the 4 playoff teams that I have. Second team I've got is Oklahoma. Oklahoma has the weakest schedule of any of the 4 teams. They basically play Iowa State. And then obviously you have the Texas game. But
I think we've got like TCU at home or something. So that won't be as difficult.
Yeah.
They've got Iowa State at home, I think, too.
Yes, Iowa State is at home. And
Texas is neutral.
Yeah. I believe both Texas and TCU, at least according to SP Plus, were outside of the top 20. So from that standpoint, that was kind of what I looked at in terms of strength of schedule and kind of put their biggest games on there. But I mean, their out of conference is Tulane, Western Carolina, Nebraska.
Oh God!
Then they're home.
Murder Nebraska.
Home versus West Virginia, at Kansas State, Texas, versus home versus TCU, at Kansas versus Texas Tech, at Baylor, versus Iowa State, at Oklahoma State.
Wow.
And they just, I just think with them, like their offense has, been typical Oklahoma. We discussed that a little bit more. But their defense last year started to creep up. I don't know where they finished. I know when I was reading earlier today, they're projected to be a top 25 defense. Look, if they get a top 25 defense,
they'll win it all.
Yeah. So I've got them as the 2 seed. I've got Ohio State as the 3 seed. Ohio State kind of has 3 big games. And that's it. If they beat Oregon, they don't have another big one until Penn State. They miss Wisconsin again, and they have Michigan on the road. But as of today, they'd be the heavy favorite in that game. So people will say Minnesota, but we saw opening week Minnesota. PJ Fleck special there. But the rest are out of conference is Akron and Tulsa and Indiana.
They play Oregon though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oregon. That's why if they get past Oregon,
that's the only one.
Yeah. It's Oregon. They have Indiana and Penn State back to back. But we've talked about Indiana a little bit. And then they've got Nebraska, Purdue, Michigan State before they play Michigan. So
that is so pitiful.
And the thing is too Ohio State, they're going to be awesome still. Let me put that
Of
in
course.
there before anyone loses their mind. But they have more question marks this year than
On defense. Oh my God.
yeah, than they
So
typically
many.
do. I think Stroud will be fine, but just more.
Yeah, I think he's going to be great.
Yeah, just more question marks than usual for them.
So real quick on Ohio State, I think they're going to have a tough time against a team like Purdue, where they've got some really good wide receivers, especially a guy like David Bell, and their secondary's got some really big questions right now. So I don't really trust their secondary at all. Seven Banks is overhyped to me. I don't think he'll do well against a guy like David Bell. So
yeah, I could see that.
I do think their opener at Minnesota is they're not going to lose, but I think it's a solid opener. It's a Thursday night game, I believe. Minnesota returns because you got to remember the Minnesota team we faced last year was kind of gutted from the really good 10-win season they had the year before. They lost a lot. They return a lot on defense, and they have a good offensive line. They return basically their whole
Ibrahim's
defense.
a monster.
Ibrahim's a great back. The Tanner Morgan is going to be maybe the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. I mean, it's not a great Big Ten.
Behind Cade,
not a great year for Big Ten quarterbacks, but behind Cade, yeah. But if I'm an Ohio State fan, my take on it would be this is a great opener because we're going to win, and it's a good conference road victory.
And it's probably going to be a night game too. So
yeah, it'll be a night game. But I think it's a good it's not Illinois, it's not Northwestern. It's a decent test, and if Stroud or whoever's they named Stroud the starter, I believe. So if Stroud is maybe not fully in command of the offense, not on the same page as the receivers, whatever, if something just goes a little weird, then maybe you got a close game. But I don't think it's
one can only hope.
Yeah, they're gonna win, but I just don't think it's like a cupcake opener,
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
And then fourth, I've got Georgia. I've got Georgia winning that Clemson game. I just think with Daniels coming back at quarterback, I think they're gonna have a phenomenal rushing attack, and I think their defense is one of the few in the country that can hang with Clemson, and they have a schedule. They've got Clemson, they've got the Florida game, but they miss Alabama, and I believe if I saw right, their next toughest opponent was at Auburn. So they miss. Now Tennessee's not any good right now, but they miss Alabama from the West. They miss A&M. They miss LSU. They've got a.
It's like their schedule's hard, but at the same time they lucked out.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and
obviously they've got some tough games, but like you said, they don't have to play A&M, Bama, or LSU.
Yep, and I think I just think when it comes down to it, I had asked you guys before, is not having Clemson in the playoff, is that crazy? And I think when it comes down to it, I think if Georgia wins the opener, which I think they will, that's what I think is going to happen right now, and they run the table and then lose to Alabama in the SEC title, and even if Clemson wins out, you're talking about 2 one-loss teams, and they played head-to-head. I mean, I know it was the beginning of the season, but how do you justify Clemson over them at that point, especially if they play Alabama?
If they played each other head to head.
Yeah, especially if they play Alabama close, which I think they can. So I've got 2 from the SEC this year, 1 from the Big Ten and 1 from the Big 12. Pac-12 and ACC get left at home.
I've got something similar. I'll go ahead and go on my 4 teams. Oh, real quick, Matt, who do you got winning the national championship then?
I have Bama playing Oklahoma, and I've got Bama winning.
Oh, well, that's exciting.
But I mean, talk about Mr.
You can't go wrong with Bama. So, let me go real quick. I've got Alabama. Nothing needs to be said there. We all know that they're going to make the playoffs, barring something unforeseen. I've got Oklahoma, same as you. Ohio State, same as you. I don't see those two teams with the schedules that they have not making the playoffs. Then I've got Georgia, so it's exactly the same in terms of who's going to be in it for the national championship game. Though I have Alabama versus Georgia, but I've got Georgia winning it all. Georgia is loaded at every single position. If you look at their depth chart real quick, especially on defense, so they've got Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt as their starting defensive line, with Jalen Carter as the backup at both tackle spots. I mean, those are 2 5-stars, a high 4-star, and one of the best JUCO transfers that there was from a couple years ago. Then at Sam, they've got Adam Anderson, who's another 5-star. N'Kobe Dean at the MAC, which is their middle linebacker, 5-star. Quay Walker, 5-star. Nolan Smith was number 1 overall prospect a couple years back. Then they got Darion Kendrick, who transferred there. He was a 5-star. We all know Lewis Sign, however you pronounce his name. We all know that story. Then they've got Amir Speed, Latavius Brini, Christopher Smith, who was a high 4-star as well. Tyke Smith, who is a highly regarded transfer from West Virginia. Once he comes back healthy, that'll be huge. Then we know what they have on offense. JT Daniels. They've got 3 really stable running backs. Kendall Milton, James Cook, Zamir White. Then at wide receiver, they're loaded. Marcus Rosenmead, Dominic Blaylock, Demetrius Robertson, etc. I just think they have everything. They even have a great coaching staff. They got great coordinators. You really can't go wrong with Georgia, and they're loaded at every position. Even at tight end, offensive line, I mean, you name a position, they've got it there. I think 247 Sports has them as the most talented roster in the nation right now, so that really is no surprise. So I've got Georgia over Alabama. It's easy putting Alabama in the national championship, but I mean, I don't see them losing until I have to see it myself. So
do you think Georgia will lose the SEC conference
SEC championship?
Okay. So what?
Yep.
So
I have them going undefeated until the championship game, like the SEC title game. I think they'll be like top 2, top 3. They'll lose it and end up with the 4 seed.
So do you not have Alabama as 1? Because how do they play in the How do you have them playing in the national?
I have Oklahoma as 1.
Okay.
I have Alabama as 2.
Okay. Yeah.
I think Alabama's schedule is so tough because they have a couple of hard games here and there. I think they'll end up being a lot closer than they should be against a team or two, and then Oklahoma will just end up pretty much blowing everybody out.
I gotcha.
But then I think once Oklahoma plays a team like Georgia in the playoffs, it'll be a little bit different because their schedule, they don't have a team like Georgia on their schedule. And Georgia's supremely talented everywhere. Their only loss being to Alabama would be, it's not a big surprise. So,
yep.
Yeah, I wasn't going in order. I was just kind of naming off teams that I thought of off the top of my head. So
yeah, I got you. I wasn't sure how you were getting both of them in with if they were the 1 and the 4 seed, because I figured if Georgia lost the SEC title and the other 3 were undefeated or projected to be undefeated, that they'd have to be the 4. But
absolutely, yeah, and they could even end up at the 3rd spot too. But I've got them 4 right now because I don't see Ohio State losing either all year.
I don't either.
Oddly enough, I just their schedule's so easy. So I don't know. Contown, how about you?
Man, I can't even believe the disrespect I'm hearing towards little old Clemson.
Yeah.
It's time for Dabo to warm up the Roy bus, the rest of y'all bus, and drive this disrespect train all the way to a national championship this year. I've got Clemson 1. I've got Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, and Oklahoma. So I'll go through it. I got Clemson number 1. As you guys have already touched on, so much of the playoff picture this year is going to be decided by or impacted by that week 1 matchup with Georgia. because I'm picking Clemson to win that game, but if Georgia wins, I would kind of side with Matt and have a difficult time seeing Clemson in the playoff at all. But I just like who Clemson is filling in their biggest holes with. I think DJ Uiagalelei is going to step in for Trevor Lawrence fairly seamlessly. He was fantastic against Notre Dame in that loss last year. And that was not an easy game to come into and play as a freshman for your first real tough college football environment. I mean, he's a great player. He gives you a little bit on the ground. He's a massive. He's just a load to take down, a cannon of an arm. I mean, he's the truth, I think. And they returned the entire defense. You know, kind of the weakness we saw last year was when Ohio State kind of pants them in the semifinals, but that was a young defense, and everyone is back this year. It's going to be one of Venable's best units. He's one of the few coordinators out there that puts together units still that slow down even the best offenses nowadays. And I think they're going to be a little too much on defense for Georgia in that first game, and then I don't see another loss. Even if they lose to Georgia, I don't see another loss. But I think I love JT Daniels. I think he's a Heisman candidate this year. Georgia's absolutely loaded, but I don't think the passing attack is going to be firing on all cylinders yet when they face Clemson. I think that's going to be a close loss, and I'll go with Clemson there for now. And then I have Clemson going 13-0, and I guess we'll see what how quality the UNC win that I'm projecting them to have is going to look at the end of the year. But I think the quality of the Georgia win will be enough at 13-0 to keep them as the top seed. And then I'll have Ohio State number 2. Like you guys, I don't see them losing. I don't think Oregon is good enough to be a real threat in Columbus. If that was in Eugene, maybe it's a different story. But I just don't see Joe Moorhead is going to do damage to Ohio State's defense. I think in the chess matchup. Eugene? No, it's in Columbus this year.
Oh shit!
Yeah, so they're going to have the crowd on their side. I think Moorhead is going to win the chess match with Coombs, but I don't know who Oregon is going to be starting. I don't know if it's going to be Ty Thompson, the freshman, or if it's going to be Brown, the former Boston College quarterback who was the backup, Tyler Shuck's backup last year. They've got Kayvon Thibodeau. He did. I don't think he gives you quite the same arm as Thompson. I don't think you can do it quite as much in the passing game as you could with Thompson, but he's the veteran. He's a good runner. So I think I might lean him starting right now, but I've heard good things about Thompson late in fall camp. So, but I think Ohio State's got too much for Oregon's defense. And I think they're going to get past that test. And then, like we said, it's just kind of Penn State and Michigan after that. And, sitting here on August 25th, I don't really think anyone expects Penn State or Michigan to slow down Ohio State this year. So I've got 13-0 Ohio State at number 2. And then I've got Georgia as my 3rd seed. So I, like you guys, don't see a loss on that schedule after the Clemson game. And if they win the Clemson game, I don't see a loss on the schedule anywhere. So, it's a good year to have your chief rival, both of your chief rivals, down a little bit. I don't think Florida is going to be quite what they were last year, but we'll see how Emory Jones maybe changes what they do on offense a little bit. And then Auburn is obviously going through a big change right now, and kind of a big unknown. So I think those are 2 wins, and then after that, I don't think there's a real threat for Georgia. It just will come in the SEC championship game, and I've think they're going to play a 12 in Alabama, and I'm kind of going against my better judgment, and I think this is going to be the year they get past Saban and get to the playoff and get a chance at potentially finally getting the national championship they haven't had since Herschel Walker era. But they might get George Pickens back towards the end of the year. But I think my one concern with Georgia, even though I do think JT Daniels is a Heisman contender and they're loaded really at every position, I don't think I just need to see Georgia put together a good passing attack that shows me they know how to effectively use all the weapons they do have in the vertical passing game before I pick them to actually go all the way. So Pickens, if they get Pickens back, that should help with that. Darnell Washington should be a great tight end, but Georgia tends to find a way to misuse their tight ends. They've got real speed in Kearis Jackson on offense and Robinson. I mean, there's no reason that they can't go 15-0. They're loaded everywhere, but I think Georgia's just kind of one of those programs where I do need to see it first. So I've got them as a 3 seed, and then Oklahoma at 4. I think Oklahoma will go undefeated. Oklahoma's another one of those teams where it's kind of like you can almost bet on them dropping a game to a team they shouldn't lose to. Iowa State's clipped them a couple times. Kansas State got them recently. Texas, despite what Texas does, always plays Oklahoma very close. So their schedule is super easy. I'm leery of picking them to go undefeated just because we've seen them lose games that they shouldn't lose. But I think they probably do run the table this year because, as you guys have already said, that schedule is incredibly easy. They're probably going to try to end Scott Frost's tenure at Nebraska in that week 5 or 6 game, whatever it is. I mean, they're just going to do terrible things to that team. So it's a great year for Oklahoma talent-wise. They're loaded everywhere, and obviously Spencer Rattler's got his eyes on potentially being the top overall pick. So that'll round out my playoff, and I think we're going to get a repeat of Georgia Clemson in the national championship game, and I really don't want to pick Georgia, but I feel like it's always hard to beat the same team twice. So I guess I'll go Georgia over Clemson in the national championship game.
So a couple things with Clemson that I worry about is their linebacker play outside of Trenton Simpson. I'm not a big Skalski, or however the hell you say his last name. I'm not a big fan of him, and I'm not a big fan of Balin Spector, I think is his name.
Yeah.
And then I don't like their safety play either. Those were 2 positions that on Venables' defense that have always been a weak spot over the past couple of years, and I think it's going to continue to be a weak spot. I think the interior of their offensive line is kind of a question mark outside of Will Putnam at right guard, so I don't know. We'll see how they do, but I think that Georgia-Clemson openers kind of decide Georgia's fate, but not so much Clemson's fate, unless, one of those other teams just completely wins out. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
I don't think Skalski's going to be, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think Skalski's going to be a long career NFL linebacker, but I think he does exactly what Venables wants his Mike linebacker to do. I think he's kind of lucked out in the sense that I don't think he's going to test off the charts, and I don't think he's, like I said, I don't think he's a huge NFL prospect, but I think he's in the perfect schematic situation for what Venables wants to do. I do like Nolan Turner at safety for Clemson. I do like, I think Booth is good. I think the secondary will be fine.
Booth is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about their cornerback play. I'm more worried about their safety play. And Andrew Booth is the second best corner in in college football behind Stingley. I mean, guy is ridiculous. I think Mario Goodrich is another good corner on the opposite side. So they'll be fine at corner. It's just that safety play I'm just not completely sold on.
Yeah, I think Turner's solid. I think Ohio State did pick on Sanders a little bit in that game.
They did.
Yeah, they do have R.J. Mickens, who was a pretty big time recruit behind Xanders, and
I like Malcolm Green.
I was gonna say, if you remember from let's say I don't remember exactly how many years ago, maybe 5 years ago, Clemson. The big knock has been the offensive line and the defensive backs. And then they started recruiting corner, unbelievably. Booth, Fred Davis, Malcolm Green. I mean, Mario Goodrich hasn't really played a ton, and I remember liking him coming out. They really turned it around at corner, and I think, this doesn't help this year, but I think safety recruiting with the two guys that they got this year, our friend from IMG, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name right now. Michigan was in on him.
Keon Sabb.
Yeah, Keon Sabb.
Oh, Keon Sabb.
And their other corner is a stud too. So
Sherrod Colville.
Yep. So, let's not complain too loud, because they're going to fix that problem too here real quickly.
Oh, man. But their O-line problem still remains.
It does. And
it's weird.
I don't understand. They can recruit every other position, but in the multiples of 2D. And
with their cornerback play, it's going to be interesting to see who steps up as third guy with, Fred Davis. I don't know what his future holds right now, because you guys saw what happened to Fred Davis like last month, right?
I don't think so.
Because it was like all over the news here locally, but he he was going like 115 in like a 45 and like crashed into a mail truck and ended up getting charged with like multiple like misdemeanors, and he wasn't kicked off the team, but I know he's going to be disciplined. So it'll be interesting to see if he even plays against Georgia. So
no, I did not see that.
Yeah, it was some wild shit.
The other interesting aspect of in the defensive backfield against Georgia is Darion Kendrick is going to be starting for Georgia after being Clemson's other stalwart corner last year. So it's an interesting aspect of that game too. I think the other thing people forget about Clemson, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording today, they played last year without Justin Ross, who's maybe the best receiver in college football now that Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle are in the NFL. He's a lot. Like, he's just a problem for our offenses, and they didn't have him last year. And they've got a lot of guys around him too. Like Joseph Nada's fantastic. Aju they love. Frank Ladson. Like, they've got dudes that are just going to be problems for other teams. So I think they're equipped to win shootouts a little bit more. If they face another Ohio State or another team that can, maybe it's Georgia in week 1, but another team that can really press their secondary, I think they can win those shootouts where I don't think they were really winning.
They're loaded out with receiver.
Last year. Yeah, I mean,
like you said, Nada, Ladson, Justin Ross, Aju. They got that EJ Williams kid, Bo Collins, who's a freshman. Dakari Collins is another freshman. I mean,
Troy Stellato.
They can go like 6-7 deep.
Troy Stellato was a Clemson Ohio State battle, and he's like their 8th receiver, if not farther down.
He's fantastic. I was terrified when it looked like he was going to go to Ohio State.
Yeah,
Ohio State. He is. Yeah,
I think he's really good.
He's like the next great slot.
Yeah,
they have not to go too far down the recruiting rabbit hole, but we talked about how offensive line has been the one they haven't fixed. They got Tristan Lee last year.
Oh God.
Ryan Linthicum, who was like a top center, he fell a little bit in the rankings late.
Yeah, he was still the top one though.
Yeah, and then now they have a top 150 tackle, that top tackle from
Walker Parks
no, Colin Sadler
from a couple years ago. Oh, Sadler, yeah, from Greenville. He
Yep.
Up the road here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they got that tackle out of Ohio.
Jackson Carmen.
Well, no, the one coming. So basically, in the 21 and 20,
he's talking about 21 and 22.
Yeah, the 21 and 22 combined, they have like 5 top 200 overall offensive linemen. So it seems like they're trying to fix that too.
Jesus,
it's like
it's like the rich get richer,
right? They have like a minor weakness, and it's like, oh, we'll just go get 5 top 200 of those and call it a day.
Exactly. My goodness.
It'll probably be a Clemson Georgia battle for Jonel Aguero in 2023. That kid is going to be. He's like if Dax was built like a linebacker, but he's going to run as fast as Dax runs. Ooh, that kid's going to be a freak.
It's just, it's insane. So before we finish, let's get into quickly our sleeper teams for the year. I'll start out with my sleeper team of the year. I think it'll be TCU. I just think with them returning so many people on both sides of the ball, they've got a veteran quarterback in Duggan who's very solid. They've got a really good running back group led by Zach Evans, who was a 5-star running back from a couple of years ago. I like J.D. Spielman as a transfer that they brought in from Nebraska, right? I think he'll be in for a really good year. I think they have an excellent defense, like they do every year, led by Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson. If he wasn't 5'9", he would probably be in the running for the first or second best cornerback in the class. I mean, he's just an absolute monster in the defensive backfield. I'm not saying that they'll be a playoff team, obviously, but with their schedule, they've got a couple of tough games. But I could see them realistically going 10-2 this year and making a possible New Year's Six bowl. So,
yeah, for my sleeper team, I've got North Carolina. According to SP Plus, they're just outside the top 10. I don't think they'll make the playoff. I mean, they have an outside shot because they missed Clemson this year. I'm a little worried. I think their schedule is very favorable. They do have Miami, but it's at home, and they're at Notre Dame. I'm a little concerned that I'm kind of counting some sure wins for them that maybe aren't sure wins yet for where they're at as a program. But I think they'll be like similar to Oklahoma in the early Lincoln Riley years. I think their offense is going to be extremely explosive. They do lose the 2 running backs. They bring back Sam Howell. They've got Ty Chandler as a running back transfer. Caffrey Brown comes back at wide receiver. I believe they returned the other starter at wide receiver too, return all the offensive linemen. So I think their offense is just going to be, Josh Downs was the other receiver I was thinking of.
Downs is a stud.
Yep.
Metro Atlanta kid that we liked.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he rose big time in the rankings.
And their defense brings back 10 starters. They do lose Surratt. He was kind of their call him the heart and soul. But he's the only guy they lose as a starter. They've got some very good DBs.
Storm Duck, best name in football.
Yeah. They've got Miles Murphy up front. They're 2 freshman defensive linemen, Keyshawn Silver and Javari Ritzy. Both of those guys it's just a matter of time. Like if those guys pop right away, that defensive line is going to be good anyway. But if those guys pop,
Tony Grimes is a stud too at corner.
Yep, Tony Grimes, Kyler McMichael, excuse me. They've got players. They've got a good roster. Schedule sets up nice. They've recruited better than most in the conference. It's just going to be a matter of can that defense take the next step? they're borderline top, 50, top 40. Can they get into that top 30 range? If they can, they've got a shot for a New Year's Six type bowl and, a lot of momentum building. Even though they will lose Hal, they've got some good quarterbacks in the pipeline too. So I like them as a not necessarily a playoff entering into the playoff, but as a New Year's Six kind of surprise team.
Content. What about you?
My sleeper team is Utah. They're ranked 24th in one poll, and I think they're the next team out in the other top 25 poll. But they return everybody from last year's team. I really love their schedule. I think their division is super weak. So on offense, the main player that they're having to replace is the running back, Jordan, who tragically died this offseason in the accidental shooting. But they really love the other running backs they have on the roster in Tavion Thomas and Micah Bernard. Tavion Thomas comes from Independence Junior College. Micah Bernard was already on the team and ran for 5 yards a carry last year. And then they went out and got TJ Pledger from Oklahoma, who was a one-time Michigan target himself. And then Chris Curry from LSU. So who backed up?
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he backed up Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the national championship team. So
was Tavion Thomas, was he at Cincinnati before Independence? Was that the kid out of Dayton that we really liked?
Yeah, that sounds right. He's huge. Yep.
Okay.
Dayton.
Yeah. He when he got to UC, little nugget there, he was pretty much immediately in the two deep at running back. And I can't remember if it was academics or other off the field issues. But like spring ball, they thought this guy's a future NFL back, and by fall he was pretty much borderline off the team, and then he was off the team by winter.
Wow.
So super talented. If he's put it together, I don't know what he did at Independence, but he might be the most unknown name there of the group, but he's got some talent.
Yeah, I think he's kind of the wild card because I think they know Bernard is going to be solid, and they know Pledger and Curry are talented as hell, and they've been at big time programs. But I think they think Thomas's ceiling is like kind of Derrick Henry light, and that's a huge name to put on someone, but he's just a really big back.
Yep.
That gets downhill really fast and moves pretty well for his size. They've got a quarterback competition, but it's kind of a good quarterback competition. Cam Rising was the starter last year and got hurt in the very first game, but he is an athletic guy, and he's competing with Charlie Brewer, who threw for almost 10,000 yards at Baylor. So they've kind of got a high floor at that position, and I think whoever comes out of there is going to be in a good position to give Utah one of the better offenses they've had under Whittingham. The offensive line is really, really good. Nick Ford is one of, if not the best offensive lineman in the Pac-12. Brant Keithy is probably the second best tight end in the Big 12, in the Pac-12, behind Cade Otton at Washington. He could actually be number one in front of Otton. And then at wide receiver, they hit the transfer portal as well, and they went to Oklahoma and got Theo Howard, who seems like he's been in college forever. One Michigan recruit as well. Started at UCLA and then went to Oklahoma. They still have Britton Covey, who played in Jim Harbaugh's first game at Michigan in 2015.
Jim Harbaugh's first game as a player.
Exactly.
Wow.
I mean, Utah, they play by different time rules at these Utah schools. You got guys staying for 8-9 years, but I mean, I remember seeing Britton Covey put Jabril Peppers in a blender in that game, and we quickly found out that Peppers shouldn't be in man coverage on slot receivers. But Then they got the Solomon Enos is a solid guy on the outside as well. And then they also added Munir McClain from USC. So they hit the portal to kind of make their vertical passing game more explosive than it's been recently. And I think the offense is going to be very, very good for a Utah team. And then the defense, it just returns everyone from a unit that was already solid and expects to be really, really good this year. Devin Lloyd is maybe the best linebacker in the Pac-12. They have both Calvert brothers now after signing one as a recruit and getting Josh Calvert as a transfer from Washington. They've got Nephi Sewell, who, we all know how good of football bloodlines there are in the Sewell family. On the D-line, Micah Tafua is a name you should probably know in terms of the next great Utah defensive end that they seem to churn out. At the other end spot, it's either going to be Xavier Carlton or one-time Michigan target Van Fillinger, who I loved as a recruit. I thought his film was really, really, really good, way better than his ranking. So it would make sense to me as a Michigan fan if he wound up being an All-American at Utah. And the defensive backfield should be really good too. Both corners are really solid. Travis Broughton. And then Clark Phillips on the other side, who was actually an Ohio State commit at one point in time. High 4-star guy that flipped from Ohio State to Utah. So super talented dude. At safety, Vontae Davis is a really good safety. And then they got Brandon McKinney, who was a starter at Washington through the transfer portal as well. So this is a team that returns so much, and they addressed the few weaknesses they had through the transfer portal. I think the schedule is pretty weak outside of a game at UCLA or at USC and hosting Oregon. I think the floor is 9-3 for this team. I've got them winning the South. I could see 10-2 or 11-1 even for Utah. And I think a New Year's Day bowl or New Year's Six bowl, is definitely in play.
I didn't realize how much that they had on the team. I'd never researched Utah's roster until you told me about it. But that is insane. They have a really good shot at winning the Pac-12 this year.
I think so. I don't know any Power 5 team that got as many quality acquisitions from the portal as Utah. I'm sure there's someone out there, but no one comes to mind. They host Oregon, and I think that's a game they can win that game in Utah. USC doesn't really scare me. They probably drop 2, but I think a 10-2 Utah wins the division. And then you get another shot at probably Oregon in the championship game.
I've thought this for every time USC comes open every 2 years. But if Kyle Whittingham was USC's coach, they would have Pete Carroll level success. Because I was just looking at USC today as a potential surprise
sleeper
pick. Yeah. And I just looked at them and I thought, their DBs, their quarterback, their running backs, their receivers, they're loaded at all the skill spots, and they are every year. And I looked at their offensive line and I was like, I've heard of one of these guys.
Yeah.
They just and they have they've got a good edge this year, but in the trenches, they just move Kyle Whittingham, go coach there and recruit your offensive line still, and you'll never lose. That's my theory.
Yeah, it's just
don't give them any idea.
It's wild. It's wild how USC just continues to just do that, not perform.
And the narrative is always they don't have talent. No, they have tons of talent.
No, they have a ton of talent.
They just don't.
They could literally just recruit California, and they would be amazing.
Yeah.
I think they're still 7th in the talent composite.
I mean, honestly, the fact that they even let Bryce Young or DJ, one of those two, out of their hands is insane to me. To go all the way across the country. I know it's Alabama and Clemson, I know Bryce Young was committed to them at one time, but still, it just goes to show you how incompetent that whole program is right now under Helton.
I think Bryce Young got the spooks because Slovis was a freshman starter.
Yeah, that's true. But still, you compare Young's talent level to Keaton Slope. It's not even close.
Oh, I agree. I think that was an easy negative recruit job
Mhm.
there, and I think Graham Harrell is setting that quarterback room up. Every one of their guys, Jackson Dart, kind of a late riser.
Miller Moss.
The guy in this class, kind of a late riser. Not an early 5-star, but is setting like the Elite 11 on fire. And then obviously Slovis. I mean, Graham Harrell, man, that guy knows quarterbacks.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It'll be interesting.
His offense is vanilla, but he knows quarterbacks.
I think USC really wants to fire Helton. Like, I think it's going to be a high bar, like probably 10 wins and like certainly winning the division. But I think it's kind of a tricky spot because you'd probably like to keep Harrell around. So it'll be interesting to see what USC's threshold is for moving on from the Clay Helton experiment.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see not only USC but how all of our sleeper teams do. TCU, Utah, UNC. I'm glad, just like the rest of you guys are, that football season's back. So, like I said, it'll be interesting to see how the season turns out. It's going to be a ton of talented teams. Only 4 spots to fight for, so we'll see who gets those. But that does it for this episode of the Hail to Michigan podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Harder, joined by my co-hosts, Contown and Matt. You can follow us at ATB_Wolverines. You can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Hail to Michigan podcast. Rate us, review us, subscribe, like, download, do everything you can to support this podcast. And we hope to see you guys next week for our preview episode of the very first game of the year against Western Michigan. So in the meantime, you guys take care and have a great day.